One of my parents' favorite childhood anecdotal stories of me was how I was the perfect model of coloring behavior. And that's only because I used to color on the pieces of paper given to me as a child. That was until they actually moved house. And what they discovered was I had actually scribbled all over the walls, like every other child in the universe. I'd just done it precisely behind every single piece of furniture and potted plant that we have. So my parents usually end this story by saying that they were torn between obviously scolding me or just admiring what a clearly crafty and clever woman I already was at such a young age. Why am I telling you this story? Well, I think it's because this piece of confusion is just a mismatch between my parents' needs and goals and mine. And my parents basically needed to preserve and keep their environment neat and organized. Whereas I, obviously being a young and creative and sort of curious child, was very entrepreneurial and independent. I need to experiment and have some fun, right? And so by default, it's not like I went out there trying to create chaos in this well-planned environment, but if I had to pursue my personal goals, I was going to have to do that. I think this same kind of dilemma is actually at play when we look at cities, funnily enough. So for example, as governments, they're very much like in a parental role where they're taking care of urban environments and the citizens inside of them. And if we start to look at the way we're building chaotic to smart cities, we kind of have this similar top-down struggle between filling in these balances and needs of sort of government planning and citizen needs at the same time. So let's take an example of a chaotic city. Say you take a Bangkok or a Jakarta, right? And they were originally urban planned for a certain population size. And in that population size, it's pretty easy for people to comfortably pursue their personal needs and goals. When you start to pack in tons more people into the same amount of space, they're already spilling outside of boundaries. So you're already going to start to create and do things outside of those boundaries regularly. And now that becomes a new normal. Now you look at the kinds of people that we bring into cities, right? By default, they're ambitious, they're creative, they're entrepreneurial, and they will do whatever it takes on planet Earth to achieve their goals. And now they also think that doing that outside of boundaries is completely normal. Now you multiply that by 12 million people in a city like Bombay, all doing what they need to do to get ahead in life, and it's easy to see why you've kind of got chaos with this very chaotic scribble. So what would a parent do in that situation, I wondered? Well, I think that generally speaking, they just try to be even more well-planned and organized. You just put up larger pieces of paper all over the living rooms and walls and give a larger sort of bounded area to play in. And funnily enough, if we look back to 1950, that's kind of how governments start to look at city growth and sprawl as well. So Brasilia, this was designed by Lucia Costa, the urban planner, and architect Oscar Niemeyer, kind of use this wide berth approach. As you can see, they have large motorways and this massive green public corridor like going through the center of the city. And it gives people lots of space to kind of scribble and play in and spill into, really. Plenty of space to grow in, basically. And now if we fast forward a little bit, a few years to Chandigarh, and this is now in India, and this was commissioned by Nehru and built by the architect and designer and artist Le Corbusier. And it used a similar wide berth approach, but it was even more meticulously designed. So now you've got 56 sectors, right? And each of them is sort of named from 1 to 56, very robotic. And as well as that, you have these streets that were going from V1 to V8. And what was interesting is he used that same idea, these communal spaces between all these areas, so people had lots of space to socialize in and kind of be chaotic in within limits. And as well as that, each of these sectors was a micro-neighborhood unto itself. So everybody could do whatever they needed in that neighborhood. So that kind of prevents what we see in a lot of cities today, right? Where you've got these crowded downtown areas with lots of people spilling into them. I don't need to do that anymore because I can do it all in my neighborhood. So this seems pretty perfectly planned, and it should all work out. There is only one small problem with Chandigarh today, and that is that it is bloody empty, like this picture. So if we look at Brasilia, it's kind of the same situation. It turns out that even the bureaucrats of Brasilia go party it up in messy Rio on the weekend because they think they can actually have some fun there. So I think that we have some learnings over here. Number one, I guess it's probably a problem if Brazilian and Indian bureaucrats don't think your city is fun and party it somewhere else. No offense. The other one is just that people are actually choosing fun and the chaos and struggle of these difficult cities even if you're giving them something that's perfectly designed and runs really well. Interesting. But I think it's fair to say also that if we look at these particular cities at the moment, they're very utopian in their model, right? And they're not very contemporary, and they're not really moving with the times. So it's easy to say that this could be one of the issues, because cities aren't static. They're in constant motion and in constant flux. And so in theory, if we really want to actually build and adapt to cities, we should be able to do that in real time to changing environments and these sort of always on-the-go lifestyles of the citizens inside of them. And that's where urban planners and governments have come up with the idea of the smart city, or the smart nation, which is what we call this initiative here in Singapore. Now, the idea behind a smart city or a smart nation basically is this. We collect data from lots of sensors that we place on streets and on buildings around the city. As well as that, we've got this high volume of smartphones that all of you have inside your hands as well, and that are collecting data from that in real time, so it's crowdsourced. Now, if we take all of the data from you and the data from these sensors in buildings, in theory, we should be able to monitor the movements and the flow of a city and then be able to adapt to that in real time. And so that includes people, that includes transport and traffic, so that you don't get one place overcrowded and you redistribute it. That includes things like even they're looking at energy grids, so we can actually use energy when it's low cost, and the same thing with water and utilities. And we can do this 24/7. In theory, that's a great solution, right? Because I'm always going to preempt and prevent chaos now. And more than anything else, with the energy efficiency of everything, I've actually gone a step further. I've created these amazing, sustainable and green and healthy places for all the citizens to live in, and a better place for the planet as well. So if I look at this, I think we've obviously moved on from Chandigarhs and the Brasilias, and we've created much better cities that are progressive and in with the times. And then if I go a little bit of a step further, I've given citizens a great high quality of life. That's far better than a chaotic city. So I should have solved the problem entirely. Or have I? So I thought if I update and map it back to my coloring analogy, maybe we can figure this out. And obviously I drew this in a very childlike manner, and my talents are far better than this terrible picture. So I guess a smart city child would probably have these motion-censored and GPS-enabled crayons, right? And so if she picks up a crayon, then it would sort of activate this GPS-controlled drone, paper-dropping drone, that would then hurtle down to where she is and drop down a piece of paper on the exact spot that she would have others scribbled and created chaos on. And then she goes to another spot, and the same thing would happen, and you go to like another spot, and the same thing would happen again. Now, I guess you could call this a kind of contextual coloring management system, right? If I'm a parent, and with these drones, I admit I think this would be pretty cool. I wouldn't mind doing this to my kid. And if I'm a city, I actually think that it's equally interesting in a way, right? Like, it seems kind of cool and high technology. The only problem is, if I'm a kid or I'm a citizen, it doesn't seem to be as fun or as involved. And I think that's really where the answer lies, because they really aren't involved at all. The real problem with both of these environments, be it the home or be it the city, is that there's a high level of data control happening that's hidden. And that's kind of unnerving for me and cold, and I don't really understand it, to be fair, as a citizen. And I think we need to look at the kinds of people that we attract to cities today. I mean, are they really the ones that are looking to be managed in this kind of manner? I think that people who come to cities, like everybody inside this audience, come for challenges and for dynamism and for fun. I think they view cities as a kind of creative commons, this great place where you get inspired by humans and the environment, and where you hope to meet and create with other like-minded people around you. And I think that cities, smart cities, need to go back to their roots and remember that about their citizens, that we are hubs of talent that attract some of the best thinkers and the doers and the creatives and the disruptors and innovators of the world. By nature, these kinds of talents are entrepreneurial, independent. They sort of seek out the problems of the world and the challenges and are desperate to solve them. And I don't think that's so easy to do in a predetermined and a completely optimized environment. And it's a lot easier to do in a chaotic one, which may explain why this is still not really working out. So what is the solution then? Well, I want to bring this back home at this point to Singapore, because I actually think a little bit of this dilemma is going on at the moment, as Singapore keeps on hurtling towards becoming this smarter and data-driven kind of a nation. Now, I think that Singapore's taken a great and necessary parental role to now to get the city to where it needs to get, to be more productive. And it's had to be that to be economically prosper and all that sorts of stuff. And it makes sense. But the problem is, if you look at Singapore now and the kinds of people that they want to attract to the city, we've got creatives that they want to attract, and designers, and artists, and entrepreneurs, and all the types that we just talked about. And I don't think that those kinds of people are really interested in being managed so much. They're interested in collaboration and co-creation. And I think they want a city that they know they can co-create in and with. So I wonder if the Scribble City extreme isn't really the solution, and this incredibly data-driven city isn't really the solution either. And instead, we might need to look at this idea of kind of a Montessori city, one that citizens and governments can actually co-create with one another. Let me explain the Montessori approach a little bit. The idea behind a Montessori approach is that a teacher would give a student a theme or a topic, and then they curate an awesome toolkit for them of toys and tools that they can play with and experiment with, and then they can discover their own responses and share them with everybody else. Now, I know that sounds a little bit utopian as well, but I actually think that we could apply these to lots of city situations. So, for example, could we Montessori data? So rather than take citizen data, right, privately crunch it, and then decide how to run a city and implement it behind closed doors and curtains, why can't that data become this open source toolkit that all citizens and governments can actually experiment with and play with together, and then share that knowledge, and then make the city a better place collaboratively? Now, Singapore has started to do parts of this, absolutely. They've got an opendata.gov site you can go to, lots of open data on it. They do lots of hackathons as well. But I think that we can actually do this on a larger open scale, where all data is open and collaborative, and you never really feel that you're being watched in that kind of manner. So I want to give one example, and this is the Urban Center for Computational Data from the University of Chicago. And what they've done is they've actually created an entire network called the Array of Things. And it's these Fitbit-like sensors that go across all the lampposts in the city, and they track everything, sort of humidity, and as well as that temperature and footfall, and as well as that motion sensors. And what they do, though, is make it completely open source. So I can just put up my smartphone, scan one of these awesome lampposts, and get that data. And it keeps updating on my smartphone every few minutes. But here's where I think they've taken it a step further. Not only is the data open source, but so is all the hardware that you see up here. So I can actually print my own circuit board and then connect it to the microcontrollers that you see sitting inside this node and hack the entire system. I think what's great about it is the Chicago city itself has actually said that they're more interested in what citizens are coming up with, because they've kind of gone through most of the solutions that they can get by themselves. And I think that there's a possibility for us to do this with our streets as well. We use a lot of data and a lot of planning to actually figure out today where to put green spaces and the best signage in cities. And the funny thing is that the citizens who walk around cities are awesome human data points who probably have some great ideas where they'd like to put their butt down and put some greenery as well. And so I think that there's a space to empower them to temporarily put up the things in a physical space that you can then make official after that. So in Singapore, I think that beyond the hackathons and all these kind of ideations, why don't we actually let citizens here physically demonstrate where they'd like to see some things? And I think that creates a much more meaningful relationship between that creative citizen that we're talking about and the government. So one example I wanted to give was this, which is soft walks. And soft walks is actually street furniture toolkits. And it fits onto scaffolding in construction areas. And you can put up planters, you can put up seats, and just find little leisure spots wherever you like. And as we know, there's a lot of construction going on here, so it seems like a really cool solution to get people involved. And another one is Walk Your City, which is on the right side. Walk Your City encourages people to walk their city. And the way they do it is they ask you to print out these templates, write down a pace of interest that is a few minutes walk away and how long it is, and you put a QR code with a map on it that you can scan and then figure out where you go from there. And the idea is that you get people to take less public transport and actually walk. Now imagine, right now, everybody is data crunching and planning to try and alleviate public transport worries. And these guys are like, yeah, here's a sign that you can just print out and put on a lamppost. Much cheaper, much more organic, and works much more agile. So these are just 3 examples. But what I wanted to show is that smart cities today cannot afford to just progress along without remembering their roots as a city. The fact that they are hubs of talent that attract the creatives, the thinkers, and the doers in our society, who come to cities not to be managed. They come to cities to be challenged. They come to cities to constantly color outside the lines and experiment, but in doing that, they solve some of the best challenges that city actually has. And we have to remember that actually, the very success and productivity that we have in cities today has come from that creative behavior and investment to date in the first place. So I think that even with the best intentions, that kind of data controlling or data daddying means that we risk missing out on some of this continued and valuable input from all those kinds of citizens inside a city. Instead, if we co-create with them and we co-construct with them, I think we have tons more to gain. And if any of you are remotely wondering if I'm making any sense at all, then I think that you should probably look in this room around you, because it's full of the dreamers and the doers and the tinkerers and the thinkers. And I think you'll see your answer right here. Thank you.